Hey, in this episode, we're going to look at the different sources of laws. So we have to realize that there are three main sources of laws here in the United States, and they come from a variety of different places. Constitutions, statutes, and regulations are all our sources of laws here in our nation. So we're going to look at those three main categories. The first one is all about constitutions and what's called constitutional law. Constitutional law is all about how we interpret the Constitution. What does it actually mean? What does it actually say? So you should remember that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. There's another part in the Constitution that you need to be aware of, and that's called the Supremacy Clause. It's in Article 6, Section 2, and it states that basically federal laws outweigh state laws. We're going to have both kinds, but the federal laws are always more not so much more important, but hold more weight. Individual states, of course, all have constitutions as well. And all these different constitutions are providing us with simplistic laws. Next up, we have what are called statutes. And there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of statutes that have been passed over the years. Statutes are any law that's passed by Congress. Beyond just Congress, though, we call state laws that are passed by the state legislature statutes as well. So one of the most difficult things for lawyers is to become familiar with all these statutes. There's literally thousands of them. And they actually have quite a bit of help within a legal office to do the research as to what exactly each law says. On a smaller scale, local laws that are passed, whether we're talking about like Brevard County or the city of Palm Bay, those are known as ordinances. So again, thousands of them as well. Next up, we're going to talk about administrative law. Administrative law is what we call rules and regulations. Within the executive branch, we have all these different offices that have been created to allow the executive branch to carry out its job. And each one of those different offices has a set of rules and regulations that they follow. So a quick example of this would be the FAA, which is the Federal Aviation Administration. If they pass regulations that force new safety requirements on airlines, they are laws, but they don't affect everyone. They're also, if you look at the image, they're the ones that are going to be governing over the rules for drones. So if you have a toy drone that you want to fly, depending on the size and its qualifications, you will have to be following these FAA regulations, or you could get in trouble. Next up is case law. Now, we just said that we have these thousands and thousands and thousands of statutes all over the place. Well, some of them aren't always clear. We're not quite sure what exactly it means. And when this happens, when regulations or statutes aren't clear, they can be challenged in court. And how the court rules, what they decide, are known as precedents. A Supreme Court precedent can establish a new law or void an old one. So here's an example to explain what we mean by a precedent. In 1989, the Supreme Court ruled in a case called Stanford versus Kentucky that it was all right for states to sentence criminals under the age of 18 to the death penalty. Basically, there was a teenager who was convicted for murder, and he was given the death penalty. The court found, and the jury found, that just because he was 16, 17 years old, that he was close enough to being an adult and should have known better. Well, the Supreme Court upheld that. They said, yes, that makes perfect sense. In 2005, however, the court had changed some. We have different justices serving on the Supreme Court, and they're going to switch how their thinking is going. They're going to change courses. So in Roper versus Simmons, they're instead going to rule that it's unconstitutional, that it constitutes as cruel and unusual punishment to execute any criminals under 18. So as you can see that these laws change over time and how they're interpreted, and these interpretations are called precedents. So as a result of a new precedent, all those states that were sentencing juveniles to the death penalty, they can no longer do that. Those laws are automatically voided. because the Supreme Court is superior due to the Supremacy Clause to those states. On top of this, we're going to have several different types of laws. They fall into two main categories: criminal law and civil law. Criminal law, think of Law and Order. Civil law, think of Judge Judy. There is some big differences of how the two different systems work. Civil law, it's more about two different people suing each other, and usually they want some sort of money or compensation out of it. Criminal law, it's when the state has arrested somebody and has accused them of a crime, and their punishment will be to go to jail or be fined or a combination of the two. So the parties involved are different in the two different versions. So let's take a closer look at criminal law. This is when a law has been made that makes certain actions a crime. So these criminal laws are passed at all three levels of government. There are federal criminal laws, there are state criminal laws, there are local criminal laws, and oftentimes they look very similar. They can be statutes, regulations, sometimes they're actually in the state constitution. Generally speaking, though, there are two levels of crimes. The more serious versions are called felonies. And we're talking about things like murder and armed robbery, things that could really lead to serious harm to somebody. And they could be punished with more than a year in jail. On the flip side, we have misdemeanors. They're less serious crimes, where the penalty is usually less than a year in jail, or it even may just be a fine. When you think about misdemeanors, think about shoplifting. If you're stealing a candy bar from the grocery store, it's not quite as serious as murdering somebody. So we have those two different levels of crime. With civil law, we have a wide variety of different subjects that are addressed with civil law. And as a result, we have a lot more civil laws out there than criminal laws. So it could vary from property. Think of a car crash. So your property's been destroyed. If that person doesn't have insurance and the insurance company doesn't step up, you may end up suing that person you were in the accident with to have your property fixed. Divorce is a civil action. A contract, a will, if your grandparents pass away and they leave you the house. All those things are civil laws. Personal injury, bankruptcy, employment, agriculture, taxes, the list goes on and on. Civil laws, for the most part, are written to help settle disagreements between people. Up next, we have military law. The Constitution gave Congress the ability to make rules and regulations for the military. And we call this the Uniform Code of Military Justice, or the UCMJ. Now, the UCMJ is its own ball of wax. And military lawyers focus on the different laws that are made up in that code. It's a lot different than civilian laws. They're going to have laws that are tailor-made for being in the military. What happens if you disrespect a commanding officer, or if you leave base without permission? Those kinds of things are covered in the UCMJ. Lastly, we have juvenile law. When a person is under 18 and commits a crime, in most states we have a special juvenile justice system that deals with the case. The juvenile justice system, for the most part, is a lot more flexible than adult justice systems. But the juvenile justice system also is there to try to help protect children. So if a child is being abused and ends up in foster care, that would be a juvenile justice issue. Curfew laws that say that teenagers shouldn't be out after a certain hour. Again, those are the juvenile justice system. Or if you're skipping school, and you're a truant and the police officers come knocking on the door to see why you're not in school, again, another example of juvenile justice. Okay, that's it for this time.